Hello and welcome to another episode of Chats with Chip. I'm your host, Chip Griffin, and my guest today is Anthony Blatner. He is the founder of Modern Media. Welcome to the show, Anthony.
Hey, Chip. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you here, and I guess before we get started, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and Modern Media?
Sure. So me and Modern Media, we specialize in LinkedIn advertising and B2B lead generation. Through the years, in my career, I've done a whole lot of different marketing, and I kind of come at it from the software and tech world, where I got started helping build software and build apps, and naturally seeing that those apps, after you launched it, they needed marketing, so we got pulled into that direction afterwards. And I can talk a lot more about that, but that's what got me into the marketing world, and then doing various forms of marketing. With my background, it always ended up being B2B and like more enterprise tech. So just finding that LinkedIn over and over again was the best platform for a lot of those projects. The last few years, we've solely focused on LinkedIn advertising.
And so LinkedIn, obviously, I think most listeners to this show will have accounts on LinkedIn. Some of them probably use it quite actively. Some of them probably set it up and forgot about it. Maybe this is even a good reminder to go back and at least update your personal information on it if you haven't at least done that recently. But how should, if I'm an agency leader, how should I be thinking about LinkedIn for my business? I mean, is it something that can help me grow my business?
Yeah. So I'm sure most people have an LinkedIn account, and if you are the average person, you probably haven't used it a ton. But LinkedIn is becoming even more popular, and especially like right now because we're all kind of forced online with all quarantines and COVID right now. Activity on LinkedIn is like through the roof. Our rep gave us a graphic that's up like over 2,000%, which is just
wow.
Yep.
I can sense just by looking at my own account and the feed that there is a lot more activity, but that's an interesting statistic.
Yeah. So and we can dive into that. Like ad performances really improve because it's an auction, just like Facebook is. So the more eyeballs, the more cheaper that ad cost is. But for the most part, what I tell a lot of people who are like just kind of getting started is, start using LinkedIn from the organic side of just like updating everything and starting your activity on there, connecting with people, just the organic side. The thing to think about is like a lot of times, even like what I notice, what I do is like when I'm researching somebody else, you might search for them and their company, and probably the first thing you're going to land on is like their LinkedIn profile. So as people are doing research, whether it's your potential clients researching you, or as you're hiring and stuff like that, people are going to be researching you. So I definitely found like, when you search for somebody, maybe their Twitter profile shows up, maybe their company page shows up, but you get a lot more info about somebody by looking at their LinkedIn profile, their work history, kind of where they came from, where they live, and then you can see their activity on LinkedIn. So I've noticed I do a lot of my research there, and like talking to like various other salespeople and our clients, like people are just doing the research there. That's a good high quality profile. So I always say step one is get dressed up to go to work. These days we're all working from home, so getting dressed up means filling out your LinkedIn profile, making sure it looks up to date. People do judge a book by its cover when that's all the information that you have about somebody is a LinkedIn profile. So make it applicable, make it high quality, make sure it's all filled out.
Right. No, you do have to make sure you at least get the basics. But as you say, I think it's a great tool for doing research. And I very rarely go into a meeting without checking out someone's LinkedIn profile to learn about them. If I'm doing research on a company, I'll always look for their executives on LinkedIn, things like that, because you can learn so much about a business or an individual just by looking at their profile.
Right. Exactly. Like what they put on their website is one thing, and like what someone puts on their website is very, they create that experience. But what you see from them on LinkedIn, along with their connections and their activity, I feel like you get a much more higher fidelity community picture of that.
Right. Well, I also find that, LinkedIn, the timeline aspect of it, as far as, your own career history, that can help you too, because oftentimes when you look at someone's biography or the about page on a website, it doesn't give you that same flavor of longevity that you get from looking at a LinkedIn profile.
Exactly.
So now, obviously, your specialty, as I understand, is on the advertising side of LinkedIn, right? So I'm sure you're very good at the filling it out and how you use it to interact. But let's talk about the advertising side, because I think that's something that a lot of folks haven't given as much thought to it. Certainly compared to Facebook or Twitter or Google Ads or those kinds of things, where I think people are more used to buying advertising. But there is an opportunity on LinkedIn. I know me personally, I've dabbled in it, I would say, in the past with my various companies. But let's talk about what is the state of LinkedIn advertising today? How does it stack up against the other platforms?
Yeah, so LinkedIn ads. I'll give you all the comparisons. LinkedIn, if you ever logged into LinkedIn ads, so say you're an advertiser, maybe you advertise on Google and Facebook. Those are very mature and advanced platforms. If you log into LinkedIn, you're going to feel like you're in Facebook 10 years ago. So kind of expect that going into it. But
so I'll have hair when I log in?
It works wonders. Getting into LinkedIn, the platform is more basic than like Facebook and Google, but those platforms heavily rely on like AI and the algorithms behind it. What I always say to people is you don't need much AI when you have the perfect targeting in LinkedIn. So on Facebook, we usually give it, and I have done a large amount of Facebook advertising in my career, so I can help show some of those comparisons. On Facebook, you usually give it like a big audience. You let the AI algorithm go find who's
Right.
most likely to convert, who's most likely to purchase. You have to give it that big audience for the AI algorithm to find those people. But on LinkedIn, you have the perfect targeting of job titles, the company size, the company industry they want to go after. So there's very little that even needs to be left up to the AI algorithm. LinkedIn obviously is a much smaller platform, doesn't have nearly as much data points as Facebook does. So there is not as much AI available to rely on for optimization. But that right out of the gates, everyone who's going to be seeing your ad is going to be in that audience that you select. So LinkedIn's, we use it largely for lead generation, and LinkedIn's lead quality is just awesome. So I'll never forget like the first account that really kind of cemented this for me. So we've done a lot of different types of marketing over the years. And there was one account that we were auditing, a client we were bringing on, and they were running the traditional Facebook and Google ads. They are a big data platform. It's a pretty expensive product, so you need to be a bigger company to have the need for it and to be able to afford it. They were running the Facebook and Google ads, and just finding a lot of people on Google were searching for, a lot of times there's people like searching for information or like researching data science or best practices, not necessarily like looking to buy this product. So they were getting a lot of students looking for research or people looking for jobs. And like, as we audited the account, they were following best practices for like keywords and like negatives and all stuff like that. But just finding a lot of those leads were still getting through. And then on the Facebook side of things, it was people were signing up, but it was more like people who were clicking through because it was an attractive picture or appealing video that kind of grabbed their attention. But a lot of these people, it was the average, maybe they were a professional, but it was average consumer for the most part that were just signing up because they thought it was interesting. And when we took them over to LinkedIn, we targeted data science people, CTOs, CIOs at larger tech companies. And just right out of the gates, immediately their sales team was like, these leads are perfect. This is amazing. Get us more of these. Because beforehand, they were generating a lot of leads, but as they were calling them, it was taking a long time to call and reach out to all these people. And all the conversations were just not qualified, not able to buy, stuff like that. So that one was just like a night and day picture of like, if you need to target a niche audience, a niche decision maker, then LinkedIn is likely the place for you.
Right. Well, and I remember the old days, and I'm sure some listeners are as old as I am and have been around pre-World Wide Web. But I do remember back, it was my first PR agency that I worked for back in, I guess it was probably 93 or 94. And we had a reporter call and asked a question about something that was going on the internet. And the senior vice president for the agency came to me and said, "You're kind of a computer geek. Can you explain this internet thing to me?" And this was before the World Wide Web even became popular. This was actually it was an email list that was the topic of that particular article. But in any case, back in the day, we were always interested in getting as highly targeted a list as we could for direct mail, because that was one of the techniques that you would often use. So I think people back then would have killed for the level of granularity that you can get with LinkedIn, not to mention the accuracy, right? Because when you would buy from a direct mail list vendor, it was out of date. It was a lot of the things were guesstimates as far as company size or those kinds of things. I mean, on LinkedIn, you have real world, real time data that you can tap into.
Yeah. And LinkedIn is always like one of the first places people update when they get a new job or
Right.
when they get promotion. Of course, they want to share that with their network, and they want to show off like, hey, I got my promotion, I got this promotion, I got hired at this company, or maybe they're starting a company and they want to post it on there. So LinkedIn, yeah, the data is very up to date, we find.
Yeah. So now as you look at LinkedIn ads, what kind of ads tend to work the best as far as lead generation? Are they ones where it's specifically targeted at, hey, talk to us about our product or service, or are they ones where it's, here's an ebook or some sort of informational, educational type piece? I mean, talk to me a little bit about, what you're seeing as far as effective tactics.
Yeah, so most of our campaigns, what we see from most people, it depends on the brand. Most companies, unless you're a major brand, this is probably the first time that this prospect is seeing your company, your name, and your logo. So it is usually a top of funnel strategy of we're doing lead generation to get people to sign up who are interested in it, it's starting the conversation. So most of our campaigns are lead magnet focused, which is offering some kind of guide or asset of value that your prospect is going to be interested in. That gives them a reason to sign up. It gets them interested. This is probably the first time that they've seen your brand name, your company name. So they don't really have much of a reason to trust you. So you have to start with focusing on them and their problems and the solutions that you can offer them. That's what gets them interested. So most of our campaigns are focused around the lead magnet, a PDF, a guide, a checklist. People are signing up for that. That starts the conversation with them, and then it's important to nurture your leads over time, follow up over email, retarget them, call out to them, and then continue the conversation from there.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it varies quite a bit depending on who you're targeting and what you're offering. But what kind of guidance would you give folks who are looking at what's the average cost per lead? What would you have to be budgeting or thinking about at least before you decided to get into LinkedIn ads?
Yeah, good question. So LinkedIn is a more expensive channel than typically like a Facebook. On Facebook, you'll usually see maybe like $1 to $2 per click for like bigger, colder audiences. And on LinkedIn has set the floor for their ads to be about a $4.50 CPC in the US. So when you're starting at like $1 maybe on Facebook and you're starting at $4.50 on LinkedIn, that's a big jump. So what we see on LinkedIn is it is a bit more expensive platform, and resulting cost per lead that we're usually getting is usually between $30 to $60 per lead. So usually when I'm talking to somebody, they might be saying, oh, I'm getting $5 leads on Facebook, but you need to go back and look at your data to see how many of those leads are good qualified leads,
right,
for your company. And that kind of then helps you see your conversion, because on LinkedIn, nearly all the leads that you're going to be signing up, as long as your targeting is right, should be in your target market there. So costs are generally a lot higher on LinkedIn, but your lead quality is usually a lot higher too.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm a PR or marketing or digital agency and I'm thinking about using LinkedIn advertising to grow my business, so not necessarily directly on behalf of my clients, but to generate more leads for myself, how should I be thinking about it? What have you seen that's working for agencies or similar types of businesses?
Yeah, so we use a similar approach for ourselves. We put together a few different pieces of content. I think my favorite ones are, we have a foundational modern guide to lead generation, which seems to convert very well. And then we have a swipe file for what we did was we took the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies. We broke it down by industry and then took the top companies there and then went to go look at all those companies and found all their LinkedIn ads.
Mm-hmm.
So we made a giant swipe file for all like the LinkedIn ads to the fastest growing companies. Useful for like inspiration if you're looking to go plan out some ads. And then we have a checklist for getting started with LinkedIn advertising. So we run those 3 lead magnets for ourselves. We get a lot of people signing up who are interested in those. There's a lot to like the positioning of your lead magnet and like lead magnet strategy. Like I said, most people that are advertising, unless you're a major brand, this is probably the first time someone's hearing about you. So you want to focus the topic and title of your lead magnet on their problems and like the solution you can offer them. So usually it's focused on something that they might be interested in. So it's not like a product catalog, but it is that checklist for getting started with something. So people who are signing up to get our LinkedIn ads checklist, you know, they're interested in how do I get started with LinkedIn ads. Right. So smooth transition to the follow up afterwards of, you know, it's usually sending them a few emails with more information, learn more here, and then having sales call out to those leads to offer them to set a discovery call, set a free consultation, and go from there.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, how important is it to be creating lots of different variations, doing a lot of A/B testing? I mean, obviously with some of the other platforms, that's really important. With some like Facebook, you know, a lot of it's handled by AI, so you don't necessarily have to do quite as many. But, you know, how does LinkedIn work in that regard? Do you have to create a lot of variety?
So whenever we launch a new campaign, so like I'm thinking about like an average client campaign, whenever we launch a new client campaign, we always do have a split test running for that. And my thought on that, on what you just asked, is it kind of depends on how mature the company is and how sure they are of their angles and their offers that they're going to be making. For newer companies, we do tend to split test more different types of lead magnets, where they might say, "Oh, we've seen these 3 or 4 perform pretty well, but we're not sure which is the best. So maybe we'd run all 3 or 4." For the most part, we're usually split testing 2. If they're very sure or have data around their top performer, you know, maybe we'll just do 1. But for the most part, we're split testing 2 lead magnets. And kind of the broader structure of a typical campaign, most companies have maybe more than 1 customer segment. So often we are split testing customer segments, and then we're split testing targeting to those customer segments. What that usually looks like is split testing job title targeting versus maybe function and seniority targeting, or split testing certain types of skills that you might target within there, maybe different groupings of those skills, maybe different industries that you're going to target or company sizes. But split test customer segments, split test 2 different types of targeting to those customer segments, and then split test 2 different offers. So 2 different lead magnets to those audiences, and then of course split test your ads underneath.
And, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about how the pandemic and quarantine and all that has changed LinkedIn, and more people are going to the site. How have you seen it impact advertising? Has it impacted click-through rates? Has it impacted pricing? You know, what changes have you seen in the last couple of months in that regard?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, first of all, is activity. So there's a lot more traffic available on the platform right now. When you go to start your campaign, LinkedIn's going to tell you, just like Facebook, the estimated number of people in the audience. We've seen those numbers have increased as far as like, if there was an audience that might have been rather small, we've seen those numbers have slowly increased a little bit. So we usually like to have a minimum of like 30,000 people in a targetable audience to run a campaign to make sure you have enough eyeballs. So first of all, is we've seen a lot of traffic is just the pure number of people coming through the funnel, lead volume. And then also, of course, ad costs have improved because it is an auction similar to Facebook, that the more eyeballs that are available, and a number of big companies have pulled back their ad spend. So there's less people advertising. So that means ad costs are at the all-time best that we've seen in the last few years. Like I mentioned, LinkedIn has a floor of about $4.50 in the US per click. We found that we can bid pretty much down to that floor, and we'll be spending our budget for the day.
Mm-hmm. And what about the quality of the leads that you're generating? Has that shifted at all? You know, I know one of the things that we've seen in some other media is that, you know, the different people are interacting with some of these platforms than might otherwise. So senior executives are spending more time on LinkedIn than they might have been 3 or 4 months ago when they were stuck in meetings all day. Is that impacting the quality of lead, or is it really kind of that holding steady?
Yeah, good question. I'd say that's held steady because it was always good lead quality, and it hasn't decreased. So I'd say that's held steady.
Mm-hmm. And so if I'm thinking now about getting into LinkedIn advertising to help grow my agency or regrow my agency, depending on how I've fared so far during quarantine, what should I be thinking about first? Should I first be thinking about that lead magnet? What do I need to be thinking about in terms of overall budget? I mean, can I get in with just a few $100 a month and see what happens? Do I need to have a larger amount to really be able to test it? What are the key things you would advise me to think about as an agency leader?
Yeah. So as an agency leader, I'd say first of all is number one, make sure your niche is on LinkedIn. And I am always surprised sometimes when somebody gives me a very very narrow niche, how many people I am able to find. But that said, sometimes people will say, "Oh, I need these very specific people with these very specific skills," and there might not be that many out there. So number one, make sure your niche is on LinkedIn. If you're a digital agency and you're serving any kind of common industry, then they probably are. So number one, get on there, make sure your audience is available. Number two is think about what it is that you can offer them. Think about what your lead magnet is going to be. Some kind of getting started guide, some kind of checklist, maybe a webinar. And then as far as budget, so if you're running an agency, you're probably pretty familiar with advertising. LinkedIn is a self-serve advertising platform. You can set your budget to whatever you want. It's minimum $10 per day. Minimum CPC is about $450. So you can kind of play with that. When we run a client campaign, just so that we have enough data and get full performance out of it, we say the minimum is $3,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, out of curiosity, what took you to LinkedIn as the place to focus on versus, I mean, there's obviously, tons of things in the digital advertising space that you could focus on. So what was it that really attracted you to LinkedIn?
Yeah. So I guess I'll have to tell you the more backstory is I originally started, so I kind of come at it from the B2B. I've been in the B2B tech world for a while. I think just that industry lends itself more to a platform like LinkedIn versus, say Facebook. My background is I got started by doing e-commerce consulting for IBM, where I'd go out to big companies, help them build their e-commerce stores. And then I started a mobile app development agency where we were building mobile apps for a whole variety of different companies. And I think just being in the tech world and largely in the B2B space, most of those target audiences were better found on LinkedIn versus a Facebook. Kind of like that big data platform that I mentioned, the data scientists, sure, they might have been on Facebook, but it's kind of find a needle in the haystack there. Whereas on LinkedIn, you can target just those people, not worry about getting all these other leads and people signing up, and not worry about wasting the time trying to call them all. So LinkedIn, it's all about the lead quality there. And if you have an offer that you're looking to just target all business owners, then Facebook might be a better channel for you because you can target that on Facebook. But as you get more niche into, if you wanted business owners in real estate, then you're starting to get more niche. If you wanted business owners for HR companies or accounting firms, then you're getting more niche. And that's when you want to use a platform like LinkedIn.
Right. And I would imagine too, if you know the particular titles, you're trying to reach CMOs or VPs or something like that, LinkedIn really lets you get in with that granularity much better than a Facebook, where Facebook lets you generally target by industry or by small business owners, things like that, but doesn't really give you that same title precision that LinkedIn would give you, right?
Exactly. So kind of advice to agencies is if any of your client accounts are needing to target that niche decision maker, then I've talked to a lot of Facebook agencies that are advertising maybe B2B tech companies or niche companies on Facebook, but it's really finding a needle on a haystack at that point. You have to sift through a whole lot of leads to find the good ones. If you're working on that type of account, I'd say check out LinkedIn and the targeting options there and see if that's going to be a better option for you and your client.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to pull out your crystal ball and look into the future, and we know how good crystal balls are right now. We were joking before we started recording here that neither one of us had accurately predicted the way 2020 would go as far as a pandemic and lockdown and all that. But if you were to look into your crystal ball and look ahead to the future of LinkedIn advertising, how do you see that evolving over time? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is a good question. So we have seen Facebook, or LinkedIn does tend to follow Facebook in a lot of ways. Facebook is a more mature, more advanced platform, a lot more people on it. We've seen there's so many different types of ad units and functionality on Facebook. LinkedIn has taken a lot of steps in that similar direction. So, for example, Facebook has Facebook Lives. LinkedIn now has LinkedIn Lives. Facebook groups, Facebook events. LinkedIn just released events. Some of these events sound funny that like, oh, it's just now being released, but LinkedIn events have just been released in the last few months. So you can now create events around, say, webinars or product launches or stuff like that. And what else just recently? Polls just came out. A new type of ad unit just came out, which is called sponsored messaging. These are more like a chatbot-like experience in a messaging ad unit. So LinkedIn's always had like the sponsored email, which is kind of like an ad that's sent as a message to your prospect.
Right. Well, now, I get a ton of that.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it not very good, to be honest with you.
If you've ever logged into LinkedIn, you're probably your third one down is probably a sponsored email.
Right.
Even if you only have a couple of messages, you probably have one that's sponsored email. But these new sponsored messaging ones are now more of a chat-like experience where you can start the ad by offering a few different options where somebody can select, maybe you have a few different offers, or it's kind of a choose your own adventure like experience in an ad unit. So those are pretty new. So, things that I'm excited for coming up in the future is going to be more around video on LinkedIn, and then getting ad functionality around a lot of these new features that have been released, say events and polls and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. This has been extremely helpful, and I'm sure that listeners have gotten a lot of little nuggets that they can apply to their own businesses, their own agencies. But if someone wants to find out more about you, Anthony, or Modern Media, where should they go?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Anthony Blatner on there. So look me up on there, send me a note. And then you can reach me at anthony@modernmedia.io is my email. And then our website is modernmedia.io. If you're looking to learn more about LinkedIn advertising in general, or the types of lead generation funnels that we're doing, we have a number of blog posts that give LinkedIn ads best practices and some walkthroughs about how some of these funnels work. So feel free to go check those out. And then, shoot me an email if you have any questions.
Great. Well, thank you. Again, my guest today has been Anthony Blatner, the founder of Modern Media.